Hello, thank you for watching this video presentation. My name is Clive Hunter and I'm from South Africa. During this presentation, I will summarize my paper, which I titled The Need for and the Training of Complex Problem-Solving Skills. In brief, my paper points out that while a number of fairly recent international surveys have shown that there is a substantial need for problem-solving skills, my research shows that very little has been done to train people how to solve complex problems. The first step in my research was to focus on studies carried out to investigate the generic skills needed for the fourth industrial revolution. This collage of images illustrates some of the ingenious inventions that make up the fourth industrial revolution. They cover a wide range of technologies that require a number of generic or generally applicable skills, and problem solving has been shown by a number of studies to be one of the most important of these skills. I analyzed the findings of studies carried out by the following internationally well-known organizations: the United States National Research Council, 2 studies by the World Economic Forum, the Hewlett Foundation, the Bloomberg Organization, the Pearson Group, the UK Department for Education, and the Brookings Institute. All of these 8 studies found that there is a need for problem-solving skills, while 6 of them specifically mentioned complex problem-solving skills. As mentioned, these surveys were conducted mainly to determine the skills required for the fourth industrial revolution. But we should keep in mind that this is just the tip of the iceberg, as there are many existential global problems that are at or approaching their tipping points, such as global warming and pandemics. So, the need for problem-solving skills, especially complex problem-solving skills, is well established. But this begs the question of what has been done to develop these skills. To investigate this, I carried out a search on the internet to determine the extent and nature of problem-solving skills training. I identified a total of 107 courses run by private training institutions and universities in many countries. This table summarizes the results of my search. You can see that although all the courses were advertised as problem-solving courses, the actual content of the courses varied substantially from course to course. For example, 69 courses focused on creativity or innovation, 63 on analytical thinking, 50 on the steps in the process, and 34 focused on critical thinking. While these aspects are all important in solving problems, the variation in the content of the courses indicates that there is a substantial variation in the conceptualization of problem solving amongst the people who designed the courses. Another interesting finding is that only 6 of the courses focused on systems thinking, which is shown to be fairly important by surveys I have listed. I must say that although not indicated in the table, I found it interesting that only one of the advertisements mentioned that the course dealt with how to solve complex problems. It covered 4 of the aspects listed in the table. The next stage of my study was to get a clearer understanding of what is meant by the term complex problem solving, which is referred to in the literature simply as CPS. My paper goes into some detail about the literature on complex problem solving, and the following are what I consider to be the most relevant aspects of CPS coming out of the literature. A complex problem exists in the context of an environment. A complex problem can be defined as the gap between the current state and the desired goal state. There are a number of goals that could be in conflict with each other. The goal state is achieved by means of multi-step activities. The CPS process involves systems thinking. The CPS process and the skills, abilities, and knowledge involved should be viewed and studied holistically. The CPS process is influenced by the solver's cognitive, emotional, personal, and social abilities and knowledge. I proposed this model of complex problem solving based on the 8 surveys and the literature on CPS. The problem solving steps form the core of the model, and the other elements fit into the process where appropriate. I'll first discuss the problem solving steps, then the modes of thinking, and finally, the more subjective elements of emotions, feelings, intuition, and insight. Now for the steps. Clearly, in order to try to solve a problem, the person or people involved have to be aware of the problem. This awareness could be triggered by intuition, information, messages, or signals that indicate that either the situation is not as it should be, or that there is an opportunity to improve it. Having become aware of the problem, the next step is to understand it fully, especially the causes, consequences, and seriousness of the problem, as well as the context in which it occurs. In order to do this, it is critical to obtain accurate, comprehensive, and up-to-date information. Obviously, critical thinking is particularly relevant at this stage. It is then advisable to define the problem specifically in terms of the gap between the actual situation and the desired situation. Defining the problem is particularly important when a number of people are involved, because they should all agree on what the actual state and the desired state consist of. In other words, they should all be trying to solve the same problem and not talking at cross purposes. The next step is to think of a number of possible solutions and not jump to a conclusion about the solution. Generating a number of alternative solutions improves the probability of arriving at an effective solution. Creative thinking is obviously critical at this stage. A decision then has to be made as to which solution to apply. There are a number of decision-making techniques which can be used, but in general, it is advisable to establish a number of criteria against which each possible solution can be assessed. In order to solve the problem successfully, the decision has to be implemented, and it is always advisable to first draw up an action plan which typically would consist of a series of activities, a timeline for each activity, and the names of the people who are responsible for implementing each of the activities. Implementing the plan is critical to actually solving the problem, and the traditional management functions of planning, leading, organizing, and controlling apply, as do the need for appropriate technical skills, know-how, and the commitment and motivation of all the people involved. The implementation phase should involve regular follow-up by the people responsible for each activity to make sure that the activities are likely to achieve the goal, that is, to solve the problem. Follow-up should take place regularly while the work is being done, at the end when the solution has been implemented, and sometime after the completion of the implementation phase. If it is found that a particular activity is or will not be effective, then it might have to be modified or even abandoned and the problem-solving process repeated. I will now discuss the modes of thinking. Analytical thinking is essentially breaking materials, concepts, or in this case a frog, into parts and determining how these parts interrelate with each other. This mode of thinking, also referred to as the scientific method, has been applied to problem solving for hundreds of years and has achieved amazing results with the invention and development of thousands of products and technologies. However, the analytical or scientific approach has been criticized for not taking into consideration possible negative consequences. Take, for example, the invention of refined petroleum, which is one of the main contributors to global warming. Also, the splitting of the atom led to the atomic bomb. One reason for these negative consequences is a lack of understanding and appreciation of the complexities of the systems and environments in which the inventions existed. Which brings us to systems thinking. Systems thinking is about looking at a problem holistically, with a focus on the relationships between the elements of the system in which the problem exists and between the system and its environment. There are two main ways of looking at a system: as a transformation process and as an open system that interacts with the environment. This diagram illustrates the transformation process. In brief, the system receives inputs from its environment and/or other systems, retains some of the inputs in stock, transforms them into products, places the products in stock, then sends them as outputs from the system to other systems and into the environment. The subsystems work synergistically to achieve a common goal or set of goals. Also, systems and their subsystems have permeable boundaries. They allow interactions between the system, the subsystems, and the environment. Feedback is an essential aspect of systems thinking and consists of energy and information that enable the system to function effectively. Feedback loops exist when an action in the system has an effect on other parts of the system. As mentioned, systems can be viewed as being open to their environment and that they interact with aspects of the environment. But it's a two-way street. Systems can be affected by their environment and can also affect the environment. For example, a business organization can be regarded as an open system that interacts with numerous factors in its environment, such as the law, trade unions, competitors, customers, and suppliers, to name but a few. From a systems thinking point of view, this complex web of interactions should be viewed holistically if one is to understand the causes and consequences of problems, especially the possible consequences of proposed solutions to problems. I will now continue with the other modes of thinking. The American Psychological Association Dictionary of Psychology defines critical thinking as a form of directed, problem-focused thinking in which the individual tests ideas or possible solutions for errors or drawbacks. Cottrell gives examples of critical thinking such as identifying other people's positions, arguments, and conclusions, evaluating the evidence for alternative points of view, and weighing up opposing arguments and evidence fairly. Clearly, critical thinking applies throughout the problem-solving process. The American Psychological Association Dictionary of Psychology defines creative thinking as the mental processes leading to a new invention, solution, or synthesis in any area. A creative solution may use pre-existing elements such as objects or ideas, but creates a new relationship between them. Products of creative thinking include, for example, new machines, social ideas, scientific theories, and artistic works. Creative thinking is especially important when trying to solve complex problems because they usually require unique solutions. The Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English defines ethics as moral rules or principles of behavior for deciding what is right or wrong. These rules relate to moral aspects such as trust, justice, equity, honesty, reliability, cooperation, corruption, safety, sexual harassment, and respect for others in general. However, it should be kept in mind that the appropriate rule or principle to apply in a particular case could be subject to biases, prejudices, emotions, and feelings. According to Lerner and others, psychological scientists now assume that emotions are the dominant driver of most meaningful decisions in life. Emotions and feelings are not modes of thinking, but it has been shown that emotions are critical for decision-making and problem-solving. For example, Damasio, a neuroscientist, found that people with damage to the emotional centers of their brain found it difficult to make even simple decisions, such as which restaurant to eat at. He postulates that emotions are the non-conscious and automatic physiological and neurological responses of the body to external events, as well as to conscious thoughts, while feelings are the conscious experience of these automatic responses. Intuition is a vague feeling that something is right or wrong, or different from the usual. This feeling appears to stem from vague, non-conscious memories of what happened in similar situations, that is, from past experiences. There is growing evidence that senior managers of organizations often use their intuition to make important decisions about complex, ill-defined problems. Morris and Cunningham carried out a literature review of intuition among senior leaders and concluded that some leaders prefer to rely on their intuition rather than evidence-based, rational approaches to decision-making and problem-solving. However, Kahneman, Taggart, and Myers cautioned against impulsive decision-making on the basis of intuitions alone. In particular, Daniel Kahneman was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for his research into judgment and decision-making. He found that intuitive decision-making often has a number of flaws, such as flawed perceptions, the anchor effect, loss aversion, and the planning fallacy. He states that the way to overcome these flaws is to back up your intuition with rational and logical thinking. Taggart refers to this approach as informed intuition. The Longman's Dictionary of Contemporary English defines insight as a sudden, clear understanding of something or part of something, especially a complicated situation or idea. Insight typically occurs when a person has given a lot of thought to a complex problem without arriving at a solution, then does not think about it for a while. Suddenly, the solution or understanding of the problem springs to mind, usually when the person is thinking about something quite different. This insight stems from the contemplations of the unconscious mind. I will now list my recommendations. Firstly, similar studies should be carried out in other languages and countries. A holistic and integrated approach to CPS should be taken. Relevant bodies and experts should develop education and training programs based on this approach. Universities and training institutions should integrate CPS into their curricula. Sufficient time should be allocated to the CPS courses. Research into complex problem solving should be encouraged. Greater emphasis should be placed on the training of teachers and facilitators. CPS should be an important aspect of strategic human resource management. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the main issue addressed by my paper and this presentation. It is that while there is definitely a substantial need for people who are proficient in solving problems, not only in their area of specialization, but also in business and life in general, not enough has been done to train people how to solve complex problems. Needless to say, the COVID-19 crisis has created enormous problems throughout the world and has sorely tested the problem-solving abilities of billions of people, especially the leaders of nations. It cannot be stressed enough that complex problem-solving skills are critical for individuals, teams, and organizations, including governments, and should be developed by applying a more holistic and integrated approach to the discipline of CPS. The model I have proposed is an example of such an approach as it incorporates the main components of CPS. And from an education and training point of view, it has the advantage of a rich reserve of literature, research, and expertise for all of its elements. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of the conference for inviting me to participate, and I thank you very much for your time and attention.